My last video was about police abusing their power. I cited the case in Dorset. Now I want to talk about politicians abusing the power, and frankly, I think this is a particular problem in Tory ranks. This is not to say, by the way, that there hasn't been examples of criminality or corruption in Labour and Liberal Democrat, and certainly SNP ranks. I think the SNP, it goes without saying, they have no shortage of problems. But why am I focusing on the Tories? Well, they're the party of government. Um, there's some things I like about the Tories. I like the fact that they're not woke. I like the fact that they senior ministers speak out against divisive identity politics. And the woman I'm going to be talking about, Suella Braverman, she's been on the forefront of that. Some of the things that she said, I agree with. She said there shouldn't be collective white guilt over slavery. Yeah, absolutely. But being anti-woke isn't enough. As a senior government minister, as the Home Secretary, one of the great offices of state, she needs to be setting an example. She has to be an upstanding citizen, and she's not. Um, this latest incident, I'm just going to read out a little bit from Times. I won't read out the whole thing because it's quite long, but this report's by Matt Datan and Oliver Wright. Braverman cleared in speeding row. Rishi Sunak cleared Suella Braverman of breaching the ministerial code yesterday, but rebuked her for her handling of a speeding fine. In a letter to the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister said that after consulting Sir Laurie Magnus, his ethics advisor, he had decided a formal inquiry was not necessary. However, he suggested that Braverman should not have tried to arrange a private speed awareness course, saying a better course of action could have been taken to avoid giving rise to the perception of impropriety. Um, of course, Labour were quick to jump on this in the Commons. Braverman has apologised. She apparently paid the fine. And the Tories are sort of implying, oh, well, that should be a line under the matter. The problem here is it's not the first time that Braverman has been in hot water. She resigned from the Truss government for allegedly breaching the ministerial code over misplacing emails um, or documents. But the question here is how many chances is she going to be given? And you have to wonder, is there something deeper here? And I don't want to get into conspiracy theory territory, but you have to wonder, has she got something on Sunak? Is she holding him to some sort of blackmail? Because it seems that he is, determined to keep her on. Now, of course, politics plays into this. I think there's a bit of Boris Johnson going on here. Johnson got away with so much. Why? Because he was a character, and because Tory strategists thought he was good for the base, and I suppose he was. That's a cynical thing about British politics today. That someone like Boris Johnson, his loyalists will turn a blind eye to his lies, to his corruption. Oh, but he's a character. And something similar is happening with Suella Braverman. She's outspoken against the woke, so we'll just let her away with things that ordinary people would not get away with. Even if she didn't technically break the law in this case, and she paid her fine, if an ordinary person tried to get sort of discretion over a speeding fine, they'd probably lose their job. And I think that's what people find galling with Tory ministers. The Dominic Raab case was a bit different because it was a series of allegations over bullying. I made a video on what I thought of that. I, Basically, I don't know what happened. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think there may be some hyperbole in the claims against Raab, but it may well be that he did have a difficult style that made him hard to work with. That's not quite the same as bullying. Um, but it's very clear that she has abused her position by treating civil servants like they should be her nursemaids, like they should sort of arrange to do things for her convenience. When their job is serving the public and serving her department, not deal with a private matter. I hope that the next time Braverman gets herself in hot water, she doesn't get another chance. I hope that is it. She is forced to resign, fired basically by the Prime Minister. And if Sunak cannot do that, then he's showing weakness. Um, Labour's right to question this. It gets into the issue of ethics in public life. It's not a trivial matter. And I think one of the things that I find rather grating is that Tory members, Tory ministers, and Tory supporting papers, including the Times, because they've defended this, the Daily Mail, and others, they continuously portray this as a witch hunt. You know, the allegations against Boris Johnson, the Mail, oh, it's a witch hunt. Express, it's a witch hunt. Boris Johnson can do no wrong in their eyes. And it's kind of the British version of Trump, basically. To the Daily Mail, Boris Johnson could do no wrong. To GB News, Boris Johnson can do no wrong. GB News is very guilty of this. You know, as soon as a Tory minister is accused of something, they jump over themselves to defend said Tory minister. But they have to see the perception here that the public see this as one rule for them and another rule for everyone else. You know, during the pandemic, the government set out very strict guidelines on social distancing. Both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak violated those guidelines, particularly Johnson. Yet they're the people running the country. There's something fundamentally wrong about that. And when it comes to the Tories, it is one thing after another. I've honestly lost track of the number of Tory ministers involved in impropriety or outright corruption. I've lost track of it. And there's been a lot, basically, in the last sort of 5 years. One case after another. It's like the Sleaze of the major years all over again. And yet they'll get away with it because people ultimately, I think this aggravates people, but ultimately I'm not sure people vote on it. You know, people will ultimately vote on policy, so they'll look which party's doing most about migration, about crime, and so on. But that's not good because it means the Tories can then sort of be complacent and feel, oh, the public will forgive us. It's not good enough. When Sunak became prime minister, one of the things he spoke about was cleaning up government. They need to understand public anger. I'm angry about it. I'm angry about this arrogance of power where Tory ministers seem to think they can do things that me and you can't. Ordinary members of the public can't get away with. That's what's so infuriating. It's just the arrogance of power. And they deny it, but it's very, very clear. You know, if an ordinary person in a company had sort of arranged for that company to arrange some sort of private speeding awareness course, that would have been exposed and they probably would have lost their job. Braverman gets away with it because she's one of the most powerful people in the country. That is not right. And yet, like I say, it's just they talk to me of sort of on one hand, she's talking tough on migration, she's talking tough on crime, she's anti woke, so she's ticking all the boxes of a typical conservative voter. And so that's probably why Sunak's holding on to her. But it cannot be the situation where ministers sort of, oh well, we cannot lose them because they're using the right rhetoric. But that's okay if they're corrupt. I think the Tories need to face a lot more heat for this. Actually, um, is it a voting issue? I think it should be. I think it should be involved at least. It's not the only issue. You know, when voting personally, I look at a lot of things, but definitely this is perhaps the number one thing that turns me against the Tories. I think they're arrogant. I think that Tory ministers think that they're above the law. I think they think that they can do whatever they want. And I do think there's an entitlement there. And I'm wholly fed up with it. It's just one thing after another. Labour is right to keep pushing this. They're right to hammer it. Labour have to be careful though. They have to be whiter than white, you know, if they're pointing fingers at the Tories, and they're probably not. So they have to be very careful about that. Starmer should take a zero tolerance approach to his own shadow cabinet in this. Well, one more thing before I run this up. It's worth saying there were ordinary people during the pandemic. I remember a student who got a £10,000 fine. Johnson and Sunak get away with it. That isn't right. It's not.